An extract from The Gorse and the Gloaming, read and written by Hannah Foster. 29th of June, 1813. My dearest Annabella, I have landed on the island and have already been met with suspicion and an underlying animosity which I cannot explain. Father and I were identified as the investigators of this strange case the moment we set foot on dry land. A porter looked us up and down and said, "So you'll be the magistrate and the doctor, aye?" When Father nodded, the man's scowl deepened. I suspect his attitude is one we will meet wherever we go, which is likely to impede our efforts and keep me away from you for longer than I would like. When I inquired about how often the post went, I was gruffly told that I would have to write something immediately if I wanted to get anything out this week. I hope, therefore, that you might find it in your heart to forgive my scribbling penmanship. I am writing this hunched over an empty barrel while I look out to the roiling waves. There is a steady mizzling. It is overcast, and though I was assured of views to other islands, I see nothing of the promised mountains rising in the distance. All I see is grey skies and grey seas and rather grey faces. I have been here minutes and already fear that much of the population is malnourished. I have prevented the ink from smudging to the best of my ability and hope that you can read the urgent and imperative facts. Father and I are safe and well, and I love you. The porter is staring at me with grim impatience, so I must finish here. I am your faithful servant and your ever-loving Neil. Prologue. Of all the reckonings death forced on me, the ones that have changed me the most concern the ideas about truth I'd built throughout my life. Our paths are indelibly garbed by the things we deem to be true. People hang their entire lives on what they believe like a coat on a hook, trusting that the hook will hold. But the truths we cling to are not solid, and they are rarely objective. Even if truth were made of granite, wind and water would change its shape, given enough time. By and large, death is a thief. It will rob you of everything you have without apology. The one gift death gives in return, whether you want it or not, is time. I have had time to think, and my conclusion is that it all started with the discovery of the mermaid. Of course, some of it stretches further back. These things always do. But had I found the washed-up creature in the presence of anyone other than Kate, I doubt things would have turned out the way they did. I remember the May morning I mustered up the courage to approach Kate and propose that we become friends. I'd watched her long enough to have an idea of where she would be, and so there I was, deep in the spiky marram grass by the sea. The strands shone silver as the sun reflected off each polished blade. I was peering through them, my heart pounding harder with each newly unobstructed view in the hope and apprehension that I would find the creature I was looking for. I'd not been nervous at the start of the day. Despite months of gentle but persistent efforts to dissuade me, I was no longer asking my mother if I could approach Kate. I was telling her that I would. Of all the causes in the world, trust you to put your foot down about Kate Cameron, my mother said as she massaged that day's bread dough. When I asked her what she meant, her shoulders lost their tension. Her face softened and she turned to me, losing her characteristic brusqueness for a moment as she cupped my face. You have always been a collector of broken birds, my Effie. But she's not a bird, Mammy. No, she said, straightening and turning back to the work-weathered counter where the dough was shrinking, having been away from her warm touch. That she's not. I continued through the marram. In a couple of months, it would flower with tall, pale fronds of seed heads. Folk often harvested the feathery pods for strategic planting in the early spring. The hope was that more tight-knotted roots might anchor the sand dunes in place against the power of oceanic storms who scraped away at the edges of the island, insatiable in their desire to increase the territory of the sea. For the moment, the more pressing matter was where I put my feet. The care I took was slowing my pace, every cautious step assessed before being taken. 3 years earlier, my brother Donald had stumbled nearby, trampling a nest to pieces. I'd cried all the way home, unable to dispel the image of the mother returning to find all her babies dead, all her work destroyed. Colum and Donald had judged me inconsolable, so they made no effort to console. Only Angus had held my hand, but there was no one holding my hand now. A movement in the grass. My eyes widened. I was sure I'd caught a glimpse of soft, pale hair. I stood on my tiptoes and craned my neck, staring at the spot in question for a good minute, and sagging with disappointment to find nothing there. I pressed on, thinking about the comforts of the village, but determined not to turn back. Hoe, the settlement Kate and I were from, was comprised of 24 squat thatched cottages. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone's business besides. People congregated in tight little circles to swap gossip and stories, but they'd go silent as Kate passed. I never knew why. All I knew was that any interest in the chatter around me would winnow away into nothingness when compared with the sight of Kate turning the corner around cold, lichen-covered walls.